obviously we do our cold email stuff and a lot of people do some different things in these areas, but at the end of the day, like being able to put a face to the business, but just
Yeah.
being able to show face and be like, hey, this is who I am, this is my business, here's how we could work together, because you do have a benefit for them, right? And I know I'm talking more junk removal now, but obviously this is kind of the placeholder for a lot of these opportunities. I think you guys do a good job of that. You also are doing a really good job on your social media presence. So people, if they were looking into you after meeting you, they're going to see things that are going to say, okay, hey, I met this guy, but also I can see the kind of business that he does. They look trustworthy. It looks like somebody I want to work with. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Blake from Top Dog once again. I have a special guest for you guys today. We're going to talk about some interesting things if you're in the junk removal space or just in general, an entrepreneur. So I'm really excited to have Killian on here from 316 Removal. Killian, if you can, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So we started up 316 Removal. We started that up about almost 4 years ago now. So we've worked with anybody and their brother, from property investors to residential to commercial. We've seen just about everything.
So one of the purposes of this video is not necessarily strictly junk removal here. So I want to talk a little bit about real estate. And I had a video that I did a couple months ago as well with a guy, Jacob, who actually recently sold his junk removal business to go into this full time. Now, I'm not saying that's what Killian's going to do here in the future, but that tells me that there's a ton of opportunity here, right? And there's something that I think a lot of people in this space or any entrepreneur really could take advantage of. But the one key thing that you guys have an advantage on is you're one of the early birds, right? Like you get to see these projects really before anyone. So let's start with when it comes to finding properties for real estate within the business that you have now with junk removal. Tell me a little bit about what you look for to determine whether something is kind of an ideal project for you to dive into for real estate. And what are you usually looking to do?
Yeah, so usually, like I said, we deal with a lot of property managers and property investors. So typically, they have their foot in the door already. But so our uh, key targets that we go for is residential. So if the customer is talking about moving, or if the customer is talking about possibly going into a nursing home, that's kind of our foot in the door of possibly being the first person to be able to purchase it.
Okay, awesome. And then when you guys are looking to purchase, what is your long-term goal with that right now? Or does it change based on the property?
It definitely changes based on the property. So certain areas around Fort Wayne, where we're located, you want to look for the income of that area. Some of those are going to be really good for quick flips. Some of those are going to be good for rentals. Right now, we're focusing mostly on flips and wholesaling. Uh, and the one we just picked up recently, we're actually doing a wholesale, and that's where you purchase the property, close on it, and sell it within 24 hours to a buyer.
Okay, all right, cool. Tell me a little bit more about that. How does that work?
Yeah, so wholetailing, what you do is once you get it under contract or purchase it, um, once you close, you should already have your buyer set up to meet you there at the title company as you're closing. A lot of title companies will kind of steer away from that because they don't want to have the previous owner and the new buyer coming in at the same time. Just makes things a little messy. So I usually try to tell my client to either come 15 minutes later or 20 minutes later, just so they're not meeting each other.
Got you. And I'm familiar with wholesaling. I talked a little bit about that in the last video that we discussed with this. Are you guys doing a whole lot of that? Is it more wholesaling? Is it more you're looking to purchase a property or do some of the other stuff, or is it kind of a mix of all the above?
It's kind of a mix. We've done about four wholesale deals from this, so and that's just this year. Um, but yeah, a lot of times it all depends on the number. If the number makes sense to wholesale, we'll wholesale it, or if the number makes sense to flip it, we'll do that as well.
Got you. And what does that conversation usually look like with, with the property owner for wholesaling? How do you normally dive into that? Because I think that's probably one of the more uneasy parts of this, right? Because, we look at wholesaling, like there isn't a whole lot of risk involved, right? You're
Yeah,
just basically transferring over the contract to someone who's going to buy. You already have the relationships with the people who are going to do that. So tell me a little bit about kind of that conversation and how you usually go about it.
Yeah, so usually whenever we're in the customer's home, we can kind of talk to them and discuss price wise on what the job will cost for us to do it. Um, or in instances, we've talked to them and be like, hey, we can waive this fee completely. If you're looking to get rid of your property, we can actually take care of that for you. And we'll get under contract and they don't have to worry about any of the junk removal costs. And usually that's usually how it starts. Um, Typically from there, you can you either get a feel for them to see if they're open to it or if they just want to get the junk moved and go from there. Usually smaller jobs, we don't go into a wholesale process unless the house is like, for a fact that they want to sell.
Yeah, yeah, or maybe they mentioned it in the conversation, like we're about to say.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the beauty of like being in this space and diving into this, right? Because like I remember way back, this was probably 10 years ago, I was actually going to look into wholesaling. I was like, this seems like a pretty good idea. And I was like, well, how do you like really start that conversation? Right? You know what I mean? And of course, now today it's a bigger thing. I can't tell you how many times people call my phone to try and buy
Oh,
literally my old house. I sold it. They're still calling me. But and I hate those conversations. That's one of the things that I was weary about, right? Is being that
yeah.
guy,
Yep.
cold calling and being like, "Hey, I want to buy your house." But you guys don't have to do that. You're literally in a situation where someone has a need already, and it kind of showcases itself to you, right? Or they're literally going to tell you, like, "We're actually like looking to get rid of this thing," and then you can go and say, "Well, by the way." Instead of paying for this, I can get this off your hands, and here's how it would work. So I think more people should be doing this in the junk removal space, at least wholesaling. If you don't want to dive into flipping properties, or holding on to them, I get it. That's not for everyone. That truly is not for everyone. And there's more work involved there, right? It's not a simple process. But for something like this, I think it's a no-brainer for just about anybody in this space. As long as you start to build your business acumen and understand what you're doing and you can get comfortable, I think it's a fit for most people. Would you agree?
Oh, I would agree 100%. As an introvert, I was very skeptical about the whole thing. Cold calling was not in my wheelhouse. But the more I went to real estate meetings, got to meet people, realized that they are afraid of the same thing I'm afraid of, and they're very extroverted. So I thought I'll give it a whirl, and here we are with on our sixth deal already this year. So
Yeah, man. What's your goal for next year for this?
next year we want to hit 10.
I like it. I like it. So when we're talking wholesaling, is there a specific number that you guys are looking to reach there? Does it vary based on the property typically? What are you sort of looking for there?
So typically when we wholesale, um, I don't like to go below 4K on profit wise. So I mean, I've got as much as 15 on one down to 3 on one, but that's because I really knew the guy and we had a good connection. So if you can make between 3 to 8 grand, that's like the ballpark, I would say.
Okay.
Ballpark number. If you can get that, that's the solid number for getting under contract.
Yeah, and I mean, I know how you are personally too. You're not out here to like rip people off either. So
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm sure you could get more in some instances, but I know you're trying to be fair and do what's right as well.
100%.
And I agree with that. I mean, a lot of these cases, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of these, it's probably like estates that somebody else owned and someone passed away. It's like these people are already dealing with a hard time. My mother, my grandfather recently passed and my aunt recently passed. My mother's actually been in this situation where, she's taken over the estate. There's so many different things she needs to do. It's a hassle, it's a headache, right? On top of losing a loved one. So, having that kind of that vision of, hey, while there's money in this, you don't want to take advantage of people. I know that's who you are as a person. I am as well. I think that's
Yep.
why we get along rather well, me, you, and Chase. But, I think that should be discussed. Don't come in here and try and take advantage of people. I know there's money to be made, but understand what they're dealing with as well and try and be as fair as possible within the deal.
Absolutely. You got to put yourself in their shoes. You wouldn't want everybody and their brother giving you a call as soon as your family member passed away saying, hey, we want to buy their house because your name's on the property now. So if you wouldn't want that, neither do they.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think just the initial setup of this is pretty self-explanatory, right? Like how, if anybody who's watching this is in the junk removal space, you've already been in this situation before. You just didn't have the conversation realistically, right? Is there a way that you guys are able to position yourselves more for like estate cleanouts? I know you build a lot. Obviously, we work together and build some relationships, but is there anything you're doing personally to sort of continue to build those relationships so you're in front of more of these opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we're going to, uh, we usually do about a monthly uh, meetup with all of our clients. So all of our big clients that are auction houses, realtor offices, brokerages, um, even some property management companies, we make sure that we every holiday we at least stop in there, give them a little something, stay top of their mind, and that helps us be more proactive. And if they have something come up that might fit us better than it fits them, we're going to be first that they call.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's something that, I talk with a lot of the guys about, is there's a personal touch involved to these aspects, like obviously we do our cold email stuff and a lot of people do some different things in these areas, but at the end of the day, like being able to put a face to the business, and being able to kind of show yourself, bring donuts, bring whatever it is that you want to bring. Sometimes you don't even have to bring anything. That's up to you. But just
Yeah.
being able to show face and be like, hey, this is who I am. This is my business. Here's how we could work together because you do have a benefit for them, right? And I know I'm talking more junk removal now, but obviously this is kind of the placeholder for a lot of these opportunities. So, they go hand in hand. I think you guys do a good job of that. You also are doing a really good job on your social media presence. So people, if they were looking into you after meeting you, they're going to see things that are going to say, okay, hey, I met this guy, but also I can see the kind of business that he does. They look trustworthy. It looks like somebody I want to work with, which is another important piece of the puzzle. Um, so I guess I'll get ready and wrap here. I think we've got a ton of different information on this. One of the things I think would be a good question would be kind of on the technical side. Do you guys detach this from your junk removal business to where it's its own entity, or are you connecting everything together?
Yeah. So we have our own LLC specifically for flipping and wholesaling. That way we're protected with junk removal and we're protected on the property side. I think
Okay.
it's very
And
important to have that.
I was about to say that would be something you would suggest, right? That was my assumption that it should be separated, not something you just combine.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So IRS, if you're watching. Um, but I agree. I think, while it might be easier to just say, oh, I did this, I think you should separate it. It should be its own entity, especially if you're going to take it even further the way that you're going to do here over time. For someone who hasn't done this, right? We'll kind of wrap with this. For someone who has never done anything like this, but is in the junk removal space and has these opportunities in front of them, what would you suggest to them in regards to kind of getting comfortable opening up this conversation? And what should they look for?
So, first thing I would recommend is see if you have any real estate groups that meet up once a month, once every other week, or something like that, and start attending those. You're going to hear conversations that you didn't know usually happen with clients, and it's going to help you navigate those areas once you get in front of the customer. For instance, we used to do role playing at our real estate group at the end of the little seminar that they did. So we'd hop in there. They give us a little rundown of what we're supposed to say. We just do a quick role play and just got you comfortable talking to people about real estate.
Love it. And then last but not least, what's a red flag? What's something that you're like, all right, this isn't for me, we're out.
If you are uncomfortable being cussed out, if you're cold calling, I would veer away from this 100% because you were going to get cussed out if you were cold calling.
Yeah, cold calling is, I just told you my experience when people call me. It's annoying. So I get
Yeah.
it. Is there anything like red flag from a property perspective? Like you see, you're like, oh, maybe like, or maybe even a customer. Is there certain things they might say that you're like, it's better for me to just remove the junk here, or is there something on the property side that would be a red flag at all?
Absolutely. So one thing that we always check out whenever we're looking at properties is foundation. This foundation could be a huge expense from anywhere from a couple grand all the way up to 20 to 30,000. You just never know. So always look at the foundation. If it's cracked, crumbling, usually I'm very weary on those. Um, on the customer side of things, it depends on where you're living, the demographic. If you have drug deals going on and you could sense that that might be the case in the area in the house, I would also veer away from that. Just because you don't know what you're going to get into in that house and whether there might be liens on the property or they might have warrants out for their arrest trying to get out from underneath it. You don't know.
That's a good point. And again, falls into my experience. My aunt's house was in kind of a bad neighborhood. So my mom trying to get out of that process of selling the home, literally the neighbors were like stealing stuff as they were taking things out.
Yeah.
So, so we had a junk removal company come in here locally, started removing these, and they were literally taking them out of the truck as they were putting them in. So that's going to make life harder for you if you have one of
Yes.
those, for sure.
Yes. It would make it harder. It is still possible to do, but just do your homework. Do your homework on the property and the area.
I guess one final question that kind of pairs into that. What for you would be the difference between I want to wholesale this property or I want to hold it or flip it? What kind of is it kind of the same things where you just feel more comfortable with that property? Is it just a better neighborhood or is it something else?
So typically, there's a couple factors that play into it. It's price that they're asking, or that you can negotiate on, and it's the neighborhood. If it's in a great neighborhood, I would recommend either holding it, renting it out, or you can flip it depending on the condition. Another thing that you could do for wholesaling is usually those are in the lower income neighborhoods. Usually those are easier to come by. People are looking to get out from underneath them. They're more popular.
Awesome. Well, any last words or anything that you want to add, man? I think, again, just recapping this whole thing, going into real estate from the position of junk removal, which is going to be a lot of the guys watching this, they're in that space, right, or want to get into it. I think it's a no-brainer. I really do. I would start with wholesaling. I'm assuming Killian, you would agree. I
Yeah,
think there's a little bit more of a comfort level there, and you're not diving too deep right away. And it's less risk right up from the front end. But I think as you get comfortable, then you could start diving into, holds and flips and things of that nature, and really starting to build kind of your own sort of repertoire of property, so to speak. But I think this is a no-brainer, at least from a wholesale perspective. I want to have more of these conversations with guys to kind of put this out there because I feel like it's kind of been left in the dark and it's a huge opportunity.
I would agree. And for anybody that's worried about jumping into this, take the leap. Go talk to some property managers, and they'll tell you the same thing. Just take the leap. Start getting comfortable talking to customers about possibly wholesaling or flipping their property.
And one thing we all know that can't be debated, real estate's where the money is.
Yeah, 100%.
The wealth is. So, if you really are, trying to put yourself in a position long term, for yourself or for your family, real estate is a good avenue to explore, to say the least. So, all right. Well, I really appreciate you hopping on here, Killian. Thank you so much, man. We'll have to get you on maybe towards the end of next year so you can kind of tell us you're able to hit that goal. And I'm sure you'll have even more experience on this as you continue to dive into this. Any final last words?
I don't think so. I appreciate you having me on, and great talking with you.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for being on here today. And for those of you watching, start taking notes on this and start diving into this. I'm telling you, this is an opportunity that is really good for you that you can utilize what you're already currently doing. Thanks for watching, guys.